am here with my wonderful friend, Walter Meierjohann, and we are going to have a chat today about all things theatre and a little bit of music as well. Are you excited to be here?
Very excited, very excited.
Are you sure?
Thanks for having me. Yes, I am. I'm a bit nervous about your questions, but let's
see,
do it.
Yeah. The reason we met is we did scenes from Threepenny Opera at Guildhall School of Music and Drama. I was musical directing, and you were?
I was directing. I was trying to direct. Yeah.
Because you've done Threepenny as well as a production.
No, I've never done it.
Oh,
no,
really?
I've never done it. No,
but you've done a lot of...
I've done Brecht. But this was my... So when I talked to the course leader about what to do, and when I heard music is involved, I thought, wow, let's do Threepenny Opera, because it's also a young company, students, and you need energy, and I thought for that production, and they were great. And you were great,
Oh, you were great! How did you actually come to get so interested in the work of Brecht? How did that start for you?
So I studied actually directing in Berlin. That was a proper 4-year degree. And the school was in East Berlin. Okay. So it's actually called the Brechtian stroke late Stanislavski as well, school.
Okay.
So we basically, from day one, were immersed in Brechtian techniques, Brechtian thinking, the plays by Brecht. Now, when I studied, which was mid-90s, Brecht was a bit out of fashion, I would say.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Even now, if you go to a theatre and they put on a Brecht, there's always this assumption he's going to be so didactic and really boring. He was a political thinker.
Yeah.
He was a poet and he was a great director. So it's like three people in a way. But I was basically confronted with a different way of, I grew up in Holland, so I wasn't from the East or something. Suddenly confronted with, it's called dialectical thinking, meaning you think in contradictions. And Brecht saw theatre as a device to change the world. Now, this sounds a bit ridiculous in our times, especially with technology and everything but at his time, I think he was really interested to change theatre.
Yeah.
And what we did was Threepenny Opera. It is a political piece, of course, but it's also a great musical in a way. But the style it's been done is something that he devised over the years, which is called epic theatre.
Yeah.
He saw it as a contrast to dramatic theatre, or he saw it as a contrast to saying the times he was living in. So we're talking now about Weimar Republic.
Yeah.
When he was a young man, he basically came to Berlin. He was actually from a well-to-do family. So this is one of the contradictions in himself. He became a Marxist. And the success of Threepenny Opera allowed him to drive around in a sports car, smoke cigars, and look like almost like the cliche of a capitalist.
Yeah.
And still lecturing people about how bad capitalism was. But of course, what he found in these times in the 20s was extraordinary energy. Yeah. I think it's quite comparable to the time we live in, which means new technologies, a society in crisis as well. I mean, great new technologies, but you had the rise of the right wing, starting with Hitler in the background. And you had then the left also rising, and clashes on the streets. And a lot of unemployment and inflation. He thought, what kind of theatre can actually capture this? His criticism was the bourgeoisie went to the theatre just to consume. And they wanted to be moved, shed a tear, and then go home and say, let's have a nice dinner, and that's it.
That's exactly the same, isn't it, with Weill, who wrote the music for Threepenny Opera.
That's right.
And he was having a big rebellion against, Wagner and the perfectionism of the opera as well. So, So the two of them, in a way, wrote this piece. I think they were in their late 20s, and it's always for me unimaginable that we're talking about a piece which is 96 years old or something, and it feels fresh as hell. I know, it really does, doesn't it?
And it's cheeky, it is wild, the music. You're the musical expert, but I think the lyrics are great, but of course the music is just something else.
Yes, it's just gorgeous. I love Brecht's music,
He might have been a bit jealous, actually, Brecht, but I know that the two of them got this commission by this producer at the theatre, the Schiffbauerdamm in East Berlin, went away in the summer, and I think went to south of France. We're talking 1928, I believe, almost like the end of the last years of the Weimar Republic. And these two young men, they were young. They were like late 20s or something. Went to south of France and basically came up with an outrageous story, basing it on the Beggar's Opera. So it's, I think, got heavily drunk and had a ball probably. I mean, this is how we
love that.
No, we always think that these are really serious, and they were later in life and really, really political and all this stuff. But these were young men.
Yeah.
And then the success, this was premiered at the Theater am Schiffbauer Damm, which ironically is the theater that Brecht, after the Second World War, took over.
Oh,
so this is the Berliner Ensemble. That was, though, commercially produced. And everyone was thinking, no one could believe that these two Marxist guys would actually write something which became the biggest success in theater history. I mean, this is performed around the world, everywhere.
It's loved, isn't it?
It's loved, and it's cheeky, and it's, like we said, it's fresh, and it's
relatable.
Yes, it's relatable, silly, but also really moving, and it's great characters, and there's so many tunes which have become such a the German DNA.
100%.
And my father-in-law, who sadly passed away from dementia, but he was in his, I think a year before he died, he was sitting in his garden and humming Der Haifisch, der hat Zähne, which I was completely surprised, because I thought, how does he know? But with dementia, you go back to your childhood.
Absolutely.
So these tunes were so popular and like sung in the streets.
Part of society.
And who never sung, suddenly was singing this song, and was going like, oh my God. But that's how much it means in a way. The English-speaking world, it's also become, I think Louis Armstrong sung this as well.
Mac the Knife.
It's become such a big
standard.
It's a standard. The biggest challenge for me was in German theater, this is accepted. I would call it, what does epic theater mean? It just means you are working on a stage saying we are on a stage, meaning you as an actor, yes, you are the character, but at the same time you're still this, you're the actor performing that part, and that should always be seen. That means you're never 100%, you're not psychologically completely into it. You're steering your character like a puppeteer in a way, your own character. Which I know in the British tradition is not so strong. It's like people here are much more into naturalism.
They are.
The stuff which Brecht would have hated, right?
They really are.
At the same time, I always say, if you struggle with the alienation effect, all these big words, look at Shakespeare. Brecht just stole from Shakespeare. I mean, so much is influenced by.
Reckon?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I did Arturo Ui once, and there's a character transforms from this mafia guy into Hitler in a way. He just literally stole. He copied and pasted from Richard III. The Globe, in a way, is also like a Brechtian stage. It's completely open. There's no pretending that you have a set which says, oh, you are now in France. No, you say you're in France. So there's epic devices in Shakespeare which Brecht just literally copied and pasted.
Do you know what? I had no idea about that.
No, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Also in the acting techniques, I would say older actors trained in Shakespearean acting are actually the best to perform Brecht. It's and I find what I like, and there's always this thing about, they say Brecht, oh, he didn't want to see emotion. That's complete rubbish. Of course he wanted audience to be engaged, emotionally engaged as well. But then he constructed his plays at moments where you say, and now your head has to work as well. So you're never just flooding with tears and going, oh my God, this is so moving. I feel ambivalent to Brecht. Like there's so much in his plays which I would find quite preachy. And you could also say, actually, it's a bit misogynistic maybe, some of it, but there is a huge humor there as well. It's really funny. It's really funny.
It's super funny.
And he was just a great dramatist. And for me as a director, because I learned in that tradition, there's a lot of liberation. And I always say to actors, and I think we saw that as well, that the first two rehearsals, they go like, what? I'm allowed to like interact with you, for example. Remember?
I do. I remember very well. I was the star of the show.
You were, of course you were. Of course you were. Always have this thing of saying with actors, like, work with what you've got. If you don't have a design, you become part of, and Brecht would have loved that, because always what is on stage. So one of the things he always looked at in theater was to say, we have a theater and it's an artifice. It's never real.
Yeah.
And I think he got quite mad when people were going completely into, saying, oh, I'm now, I don't know, I'm Hedda Gabler and I'm so. No, it's like you are an actor who's playing a role, but we are all together in a shared experience in a theater which has lights, has sound, which has music, which has acting, words. He came up with this idea, it's calling, theater for him he said there are multiple sister arts. So for example, he would say the lights or the lighting department would be as crucial to making this work as the actor's lines.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not quite sure if you really believe that, but what it means is saying like music is a sister art to the theater as well. We do that anyway in a theater or in a production. We go, okay, head of light, head of sound, head of... But actually to think that's the beautiful thing about theater, we have to collaborate.
Yeah.
And we worked, and of course you didn't have an orchestra.
Yeah.
It was basically you.
Yeah.
And you had to whip the actors into singing.
They did a great job.
They did a great job. They were year 2, which really blew my mind. Some of them were extraordary.
Yeah.
And maybe, can I ask a question to you as well?
Oh yeah,
After all this, so Brecht said he wants actors to sing these parts.
Yeah.
Which of course is a challenge because they're not trained musicians or trained singers. How did you find that? How did you find working with actors?
As opposed to,
I mean, we could have gone, okay, maybe there's an opera department and we'll just say this is called a Threepenny Opera, so let's do this as an opera and let's get the opera singers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it's an anti-opera, isn't it? That's the first thing for people to bear in mind. It was meant to be a real rebellion against Wagner.
That's right.
Very expensive expressionism, and the Wagner operas being 4 hours long and the set being absolutely perfect and detailed. This was very different. I mean, the orchestra that File composed for Threepenny Opera would have been instruments that wouldn't even have been allowed in an opera house. It was like stuff you'd see in a jazz club.
Yes, the jazz club's quite good because Brecht said his ideal audience member would be, and this is at that time, would have a glass of something and a cigar or a cigarette. That atmosphere, which is not I've paid my money and I'm just sitting and consuming. He wanted them to basically reflect as well, like listen but also reflect.
That's the thing, and I think that really important for actors to consider when they're coming across something like Threepenny Opera. I think what was really fun as well is we added in a actor-musician element, which was, I think they all loved doing that. In the end, I think they were all a bit nervous at first, but then after, because it was funny, we'd have a person playing Polly getting up and playing the trumpet.
That's right.
In the Mum and Dad song. It was so silly. I think the text is always the really important thing, and I think what Brecht and Weill did really well is they would take a tune like Mac the Knife, and they would have the same thing going over and over with the music. It was always just the same repeated bit, but very detailed, different text. So first of all, the audience can kind of just sit back and listen without having to keep hearing new melodies and kind of comprehend those. So Mac the Knife, like that character was a very violent gangster in East London who was doing awful crimes. And they detail that in the lyrics, and then you've got this such a Brecht move, isn't it? You know,
contradiction.
Actors and classical singers can lend to each other a bit more. I think actors maybe, they need to think sometimes about their technique, but then I think for them the most important thing is the storytelling. Classical singers, sometimes with the student ones, I do think in the leader, an art song, they need to definitely think more about their acting. I think sometimes they could actually take a leaf out of actors' books, but I really enjoyed working with the actors. I think they needed a bit of a push to not be perfect. But I don't think Brecht wanted perfection.
No.
Would you agree?
Great singers of, I don't know, like Lotte Lenya or these kind of people.
She can even read music.
Yes, that's what I mean. So it's, in German you say gestisch, which means it's with an intention, and it's clearly, you have an intention. So sometimes, I found this as well, we had something, not naming anyone, but if they actually narrated it, and didn't go into beautiful singing, it was stronger.
Yeah.
When they tried to really be perfect, it became a bit dull.
100%.
So it's, in a way, it is the storytelling device, which again is the epic. So you tell this story with song in a way. So it's always, you've got to land the story.
Because he wanted to drive the action, but at the same time, he wanted to interrupt what was going on. Would you agree?
Yes.
It's a very interesting point you made about English actors in particular, because I've actually got a very strong acting background. I'm actually a member of Equity.
Okay.
And I've done National Youth Theatre, Junior Guildhall Drama, National Youth Music Theatre. So I actually wanted to be an actor before I went into piano, but I did most of my training in Stanislavski.
Oh, yes.
Technique.
Yes. Yeah.
So you definitely, even I was a bit like, wow, it's a bit of a shock when you approach Brecht. It's such a different vibe. But I think also for Threepenny Opera, because Weil's still in a classical tradition, the sheet music was written in that tradition rather than like a jazz standard or something. It was jazz sounding, but still classical. I worried about sticking to the dots on the page.
You were quite strict in a good way, I think, in a way too. I mean, this is the same with, have to give actors or musicians like quite a strict frame.
Yeah.
But then you should allow them, that's always what I want to see then, is that they really play with that. And I think the playful nature, it's in the music, it's in the Brechtian. That's what I mean about actually protecting Brecht from not being this dour guy, but actually there's a playfulness. Also because we had young people, and for example, it's quite fun, young people playing suddenly Peachum and Mrs. Peachum playing parents who were 19 or 20 and playing these, 50-year-olds. And there you have already like a Brechtian, like a contradiction to say this is a 21-year-old kid.
Yeah.
But he's got to put on the gesture of a patriarch.
I know.
And that's fun. That's how children also act.
Yeah.
Grown-ups, for example.
Yeah, definitely.
You are with Brecht allowed to, I think with Shakespeare as well, that you are allowed to be playful.
Speaking about live music in theatre, because I played and we had the actors getting up and playing their instruments. I do think there is a place for recorded sound in theatre and using pop music and stuff like that. I love that. But why do you think live music is important?
Well, this comes back to the Brechtian, what I talked about, like the sister art, when he has a deep respect for all the art forms. And if there's budget, like we always have to also talk about the realities. But if you have the potential to work with a live musician, for example, you always show how it's being made. Yeah. It's very truthful in a way, but it's also not saying, oh, let's underscore in order to manipulate and say, now you should feel sad. You know what we do very often in films. Yeah. So I think his big philosophy was theatre as a space, always show what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I've worked on many productions in theatre. I've actually only assisted twice in the opera and have once had to turn down an opera. That would have been my first big one. And then with you, actually, that was my first opera experience where I was directing.
Cool.
Cool. So I've done, for the rest, all theatre. But I've had a time, for example, for almost like 5 years where I was constantly working with one as an actor-musician, actually.
Right.
But we always had his piano or whatever we was doing, something on an organ, always, not center stage, but on the side of the stage, and always showing how it was made.
Yeah.
And it was great. Yeah. As you said, I mean, we live in these times, a digital time. Of course, you're going to have recording and you're going to work with that. And the interaction between a musician and an actor on stage, that's beautiful.
It's magic.
It's magic because they can really play together, but they play different...
Live reaction.
Yeah, live reaction. Yeah. And that's, I think, what audience get most excited about, to seeing that chemistry.
One of my favourite directors, writers of all time is Jethro Compton. I've been following his work since I was about 17, from when he's done productions at Southwark Playhouse. But now he's doing Benjamin Button in the West End. Okay. And I saw both productions before it went to the West End. Yeah. And all the actors are playing the instruments, not only playing them, but they're playing them to a very high level. Wow. And I think that's why that production has done so well and like skyrocketed. Not just, I mean, Jethro is extraordinarily talented, but I think that production in particular, the reason that's the one that's gone to the West End is because of the level of the instrument playing of the actors is absolutely amazing. So I do think people really love that.
Yeah.
It's underestimated, perhaps.
I agree. And I think there's always this gloss sometimes over things and pretending that we're in a film, but actually, no, we're on a stage and actually showing the collaboration and showing the chemistry, as I was saying, or the sparks, and really seeing how they collaborate is beauty. You know, that's, and I think my dream actor is actually like an actor-musician.
Really?
Not like an opera. I mean, I would love to do more in opera, but I think this idea that you can, as an actor, perform and then suddenly take an instrument is again very Brechtian.
So like it's just quite like wowing. I mean, speaking of opera, so you've assistant directed on two,
yes.
So of course I do a lot of work in opera, and I work with a huge amount of like opera singers. How did you find working on an opera as opposed to working in theatre?
It was really interesting. I worked with a director who's not well known. His name was Klaus-Michael Gruber, and he's German, but he actually studied in Italy as an actor, and then he worked for Strehler. Strehler was one of the big, like, Brechtians. This is quite related in a way, quite anti-naturalistic, but still big stuff. And so I met him when he was probably in his late 60s, mid 60s or something, and I was one production I came out of almost after I'd done two productions. Suddenly I was assisting, which I'd never done before and didn't really want to.
Right.
But working with him, I mean, one was Aida.
Yeah.
I mean, big stuff, beautiful music. And the other one was Don Giovanni.
Oh,
so
fun.
I have to say that I think I learned more from these 5-week rehearsals in that time than actually studying for 4 years directing.
Wow.
From this guy, and I felt he was a very sensual guy. And he was very clever, but he never talked. He just never explained. So that was very different to theatre. My experience in opera was this guy just says a few things and then they started. Music takes over. And the singers, of course, they were world-class singers. Yeah. They've done probably these parts 3 times, 4 times before.
Yeah.
But one of the greatest memories I will never forget was the aria La ci darem la mano. That one.
Yeah.
And he sometimes had this thing I was watching, and he sometimes just went on stage. So this was not a performance. We were rehearsing on the stage already, 5 weeks. And he was watching from the back. So it was very weird to have him
off the stage?
On the stage. And so and she was singing to the front going, oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
And he came to her, and she was a very young, very famous, I think, young Russian singer. While she was singing, he came to her and tickled her armpits from the back. Now, you could say, this is 20 years ago or something, right? You would say nowadays, this is inappropriate and you cannot do this, no consent, blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
but what he caught was this moment, it was timed, you know, and it goes up, this moment, and she laughed.
Yeah.
And that moment was magic. Yeah. It was complete magic.
Yeah.
And of course, nowadays, I mean, this is really like 20 years ago where we'd say nowadays, you cannot do, you don't know.
Yeah.
At the same time, really a moment of magic.
Yeah.
And he did something else with Toby Spence. You know Toby?
Yeah, of course.
He was also in Don Giovanni.
Yeah.
And he was Don Ottavio, and he was singing to the front, and he's got a great voice, blah, blah, blah. But Gruber said to him, in this moment, please turn around and sing to the back wall. Now, you would normally think the ego of a singer, you'd go, what the hell, how, what?
Yeah.
He did it, and all of us in this, we were the artistic team, started to cry.
Wow.
It was so powerful.
Oh my God.
The acoustics were great anyway, but that's this moment and for me it was like a man singing his pain. And I don't know why, I suddenly had an image of, I was, in Jerusalem, the Wailing Wall.
Yeah.
And I saw this man singing against the wall.
Yeah. And
I will never forget that because it was so simple.
Yeah.
It was a director saying, could you just turn and sing it that direction? And we had, at that time, Toby was a very young man doing it.
Yeah.
So the great thing was, he had this quite young ensemble of brilliant Stéphane Degout. I don't know if you know.
Yes,
Stéphane, he was singing Don Giovanni, so he was very young.
Gosh.
And it was for me such a learning curve. And also, I've always loved music. What I loved about the opera experience was the moment the music starts, you're in a different ball game. Yeah. You're in a different world.
Yeah.
In theatre, of course, you have the words, but there is no score. There is no that thing. You have to create all that.
Yeah.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah.
But I love these moments, even like in the morning when you're a bit tired. The moment the music starts, you are off.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
And you cannot fuff around or anything. And I think there's more rigor, there's more discipline in a way.
Right.
And I've always loved that. Some of these opera singers, I was going like, oh my God. I was assisting in Amsterdam, and one of them, for example, I know that they don't sing out. Is that right? They don't sing out in rehearsals?
Yeah, they mark.
They mark?
They mark, yeah.
But that day, particularly, one of the divas came in and said, oh, I've injured my ankle. And she said, today I can only sing out even less. And I was, a directing student, and I went into, what's that got to do with your voice? You know what I mean? Going like, and this sort of, oh, give me please, and ice to my ankle, and I was just going, oh my God. This
Actors is very much like, get on with it.
You've got to get on with it. You've got to get on. You don't have the money, you don't have the time. And so, of course, I'm never saying like theatre is like, there's no discipline or anything, but it doesn't have that, you go, you've got to create that.
Yeah.
And that's very different.
Yeah.
And I love that also in our rehearsals, when the moment you started, I could say something before or after, but the moment you start, you just go, you go.
Sure.
And that's very different to theatre.
It was such a great experience we had, wasn't it? It was so fun.
Yeah.
Thinking about, if someone was going to approach Brecht for the first time, what do you think are the most, important things for people to think about? What do you think sometimes maybe actors miss when they're approaching Brecht for the first time?
I'm coming back to what I said, I think at the beginning, about what kind of theatre Brecht wanted.
Yeah.
And it all boils back to a society in crisis. I mean, yes, you could study Brecht and say, okay, academically, I know all that stuff. But I think if you have an interest to look at your own society and think about theatre not just as a tool to earn big bucks, which you will never do.
You heard it here.
You heard it. But if you really think it's a tool to question and also entertain, but also make audiences like feel that the arts are also. So for example, at the moment, I've just read that the arts budget in Berlin, which is so much higher I think the arts budget in Berlin is the same as the arts budget from the Arts Council for the whole of Britain, been cut by 12 to 13%.
Oh, okay.
So this is deeply troubling. I mean, like, especially for Berlin. The reason I'm mentioning that is because German theatre, or I would also say Brechtian theatre, you need subsidies in order to question society. You need the money.
Yeah.
The moment you don't have that money, let's say a commercial production here, of course you've got different rules.
Yeah.
You cannot just say, oh, I'm going to be critical of the system, where you have to actually pay actors a lot and famous people and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But of course, Brecht was very critical of that.
Yeah.
And I'm critical of that because it's great to have a star, but actually the production should not be about that star. It should be about the piece. It should be about,
100.
And the message that audience don't talk afterwards, oh, she or he was so great. You should say, oh God, that make me think differently, or it make me feel differently. So I think these are the big things which I would say I connect to Brecht in a way.
Right.
And I think when we talk about crisis, I mean, we just have to list, what is it? Brexit, Ukraine war, the cost of living.
Yeah.
Capitalism is in crisis. So Brecht's time is now, I would say.
Yeah.
Can we lift this away from this preachy thing? I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
But the idea of saying, use Brechtian techniques to be more liberated, not to think, oh, I've got to now just focus on my character. No, think about the whole thing. I think this is what Brecht encourages people to, you should be your own director, meaning don't just rely on someone to tell me, oh, I go from left to right. No, you actually say, I'm here as a person as well. I think this is really, really key to say, you're not hiding behind a character. You will always be seen. You will not be 100% the character. No, you're always going to be Claire doing that character. And I think this is a cultural difference, I would say. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. But I think when I worked, I did an Arturo Ui here. And I remember these first days where actors were going, oh my God, elimination effect, how do you do that? And I was just saying that, no, just look at Shakespeare. And then there is a playfulness which I think all actors would relate to. Because Brecht focused on the unemployed, the homeless, women. He looked at the injustices of society. And this is again a time we need to look at these things. And make that the main focus again. That's why I think there will be a comeback, but maybe not in his preachy plays, but more in the style also. And maybe even when you don't have the budgets anymore to have these wonderful set designs. I mean, I love set design. But you know what we did? We had you on the piano, and then we had 10 chairs. And that was the set.
I mean, it was magical though, wasn't
it? Was so simple. It was so simple. And they needed then an extra chair and an extra table.
And they changed.
And they changed, and the whole time it was constantly. But that sort of openness to say, okay, we are a poor theatre, could actually lead to a rich experience.
Oh, I love that.
Wow, I love that.
Wow.
Wow. So.
I always ask a rogue question at the end. So my question today is, what is your least favourite fruit?
Oh my God.
And why?
The least favourite fruit?
I know, because I feel like the favourite is more predictable, isn't it, as a question. So.
Oh my God,
I know, it's a hard question.
Does this exist? Like, do you know, is it rose butts? Is that a fruit?
What?
Is that fruit? No.
Rose?
No, the rose, you know that you can make jam out of that. Do you know that?
Like a blackberry?
No, it's a red thing.
A raspberry? A pomegranate?
No, it's a red little...
Strawberry?
No, I like strawberry. I love strawberry. What's it called? My mother used to make them. Or quince? Does that exist?
Maybe.
Is that a fruit?
I think I've heard of that.
Quince. It's awful. It's disgusting.
So you didn't like that when you were
Didn't like that. No, I hated that. I mean, she was very good at making jams, but these two were not. They were not good.
Oh my God.
But the rest, why would you not like fruit? I mean, is there any fruit? What's your...
Mine is bananas.
You don't like bananas?
I hate bananas.
How can you not like bananas?
Do you know what? I tried to train myself. Because you can actually train yourself to like certain foods. So I used to hate dark chocolate and now I love it. Okay. For example.
Okay.
And avocados as well.
You don't like avocados?
I didn't, but I trained myself to like them. But with bananas, because they're really good for performing.
Yes.
So I tried to like force myself. I was like, come on.
So you have one just before? Energy and sustainable.
One time I thought, I'm going to try this for a really big competition I was doing when I was in my early 20s. I thought, right, I'm going to eat this banana and it's going to get me. And I was walking along eating, like, first of all, the pure stringiness of it. I was like, oh God. But then I ate it and I was just sick.
You were sick during the performance?
No, as I was walking along to this competition. Wow. I love banana flavoured things like banana ice cream, banana sweets.
Banana shakes, milkshake.
I don't know about that.
You haven't had that?
Let's not go too far.
It's really good, really good.
Is it? Okay, maybe I'll try one, but...
So banana you hate?
Yeah, I hate them. I hate them so much.
What about vegetable?
Beetroot comes to mind.
What? You hate beetroot?
I do make myself eat it now and again.
Oh my God. All the good things you don't like.
I kind of like a plain...
What about Brussels sprouts? I mean, that's...
I love sprouts.
You love sprouts,
okay. A sprout, as long as you cook them right.
Yeah.
What about you?
Like, I think as a kid, I like kale or something.
You don't like kale?
I didn't. I used to really not like it, but now...
You like kale? You've trained yourself?
I've trained myself, like you. And even like broccoli was not on my thing, but now I know the health benefits and all that stuff.
You can make kale crisps.
Yes, I think I have, yes.
I've done that. You put them in the oven, some olive oil.
And they're great, are they?
I mean, look, they are what they are. They're healthier than crisps, aren't they?
Yes, exactly.
So that's the main thing. Yeah. Woo! Go team!